I'm Lauren and welcome to another video from the Tiny Menagerie. Some fish have a well-deserved popularity and perhaps none more so than the Panda Corydoras catfish, often referred to as either Panda Corys or simply just as pandas. These charming and diminutive little catfish are ideal community tank inhabitants. They have that wonderful quality of being so very gentle they can be kept with even the smallest of other fish. They only themselves grow to a small size, and they're not too fussy about either their diet or their tank requirements. But what are panda cats like to keep, and what kind of setup do they need? Named, quite obviously, for their rather striking black and white coloration, pandas hail from Peru, and particularly from the Ucayali River system and its tributaries. There they inhabit black, slow-flowing, often really quite poorly oxygenated waters in huge schools that can have hundreds and hundreds of individuals. But don't worry, they don't need black water in order to thrive, and clear water in a pH range of around neutral, so anywhere between 6 and 8 will be absolutely fine for them. Although of course, they're not going to object to black water neither. And they are perfectly happy in a slightly cooler temperature range of around 20 to 25 degrees. One factor though that you really do need to take into consideration before you buy any pandas is their need to be sociable. They're like all Corydoras catfish, they really do much better with a group of their own kind rather than kept as individuals. As a minimum, you should be looking at keeping 4 or 5 fish, and preferably more if you have the space. And because of this, while they are quite small, they're not really suitable for nano tanks. As a minimum, you should be looking to provide your school with an area of at least 30 by 80 centimetres. Remembering that as bottom dwellers, Corys can only use one layer of the tank, and so it needs to be proportionately bigger compared to the size of fish if they were able to go and use multiple layers, if they could swim at the surface, for example. But because they can only use one layer, that one layer needs to satisfy all of their space requirements. Pandas will quite happily school with other Cory species if they get the chance, although that should not be a substitute for socialising with their own kind. I actually find mine quite like any other fish that has black markings on them. They even quite like swimming with a batch of young tigers that I'm currently growing out in their tank. The pandas will happily go and visit the youngsters for a bit before going back to foraging on the bottom. And that's one of the really lovely qualities of Corydoras that makes them so popular. They're like the neighbour that you've always wanted. You know that if you had any trouble, they'd pop round for a cup of tea and a chat, and they probably bring cake too. They're just one of these fish that everybody likes and everybody gets along with. So long as the other fish isn't aggressive or so large that it views the panda as dinner, of course. Pandas are in fact so very gentle they even make perfect companions for fry in grow-out tanks. They have no interest in hunting fry at all, they will leave them completely alone, although they will take eggs if they find them, so don't use them in an actual spawning tank. In a grow-out tank though, the pandas will just happily consume any food that falls through down to the bottom, making sure that it doesn't have a chance to break down and decay, and ultimately keeping the water cleaner. As for the tank itself, pandas are not particularly difficult to accommodate. Even the largest female is only going to grow to about 2 inches in length, and the males are considerably smaller at about 1.5 inches. They do like to have hiding places available to them, and so you're going to want to provide them with some form of decoration. It can be live plants, fake plants, driftwood, anything really, so long as the Corys can get underneath it, which is where they're going to feel the safest. Just be wary though that like all Corys, pandas have a very strong dart reflex if they're startled. And unfortunately, stories of pandas getting fatally trapped in rockwork really isn't that uncommon, especially considering those spines that they have running along their pectoral fins. These basically act as a perfect anchor, trapping the fish in a small space. And for that reason, it's best not to use rock that has narrow holes in it that fish might try to dart through. So no white ocean rock, for example. These are basically just death traps to a fleeing fish. In fact, in all honesty, I don't like these stones at all because I've lost young rosy barbs to them as well. But that's just my experience with them. They might be absolutely fine in your tank. Feeding your pandas is both easy and difficult in equal parts. They're an omnivorous species, and so they will quite happily forage on pretty much anything that falls to the bottom of the tank. They will take small pellets, frozen and live food, bloodworms, cyclops, brine shrimp, you name it. Just be slightly wary though if you're only feeding flake food. Make sure it is actually getting to the bottom of the tank. Flakes have this annoying tendency to float for a seemingly never-ending amount of time, where they're just going to be slowly picked off by your surface-dwelling fish, and so if none's sinking down, then your pandas may well be going hungry. To make sure they're getting a share, it's worth just watching them to make sure that they're feeding too. Breeding pandas is not difficult, but it does take patience. More often than not, shops will only sell very young cories, and so you're going to have to wait for quite literally months before you're going to have the opportunity to breed them. And then if your luck is anything like mine, you'll have waited for months, and they'll all turn out to be female. Well, go figure. Never mind, I guess I'll just have to get a few more. Most cories mature at about a year old, and pandas are no different, at which point sexing them will become very much easier as the females are considerably bigger, they will swell up with eggs, have a nice big round belly, and the males will be much more slimmer, tapering down quite quickly from the back of their head. The females can be induced into spawning by doing a 50% cool water change, and then after mating they will deposit their eggs around the tank for you to collect and grow on. And once they start breeding, pandas are prolific, and as they live for 15 to 20 years, once you've got them going, you will never have to buy another one. Overall, pandas are a quintessential Corydoras catfish. They have the looks, the gentle temperament, and the ease of keeping that has brought them and the rest of their cory cousins up to the very top of most fish keepers' wanted list. And it is a well-deserved title. Anywho, I hope you've enjoyed this little video all about panda cories. Happy fish keeping everyone, and I'll see you again soon. Bye bye!